Welcome to another D3+2 battle report. It's the height of the summer. I've decided to take a little break off from work in order to record a bunch of battle reports that I can then hopefully upload over a little period of time. And we're going to be debuting my new Tyranid army today, so apologies, not much of it is painted. We'll take a better look in a second. But if you really hate having lots of unpainted miniatures on the table, this battle report in particular is not going to be for you. But anyway, it's going to be 1250 points of Space Marines, Ultramarines to be exact, against the new Tyranids. And we'll go over the list now very quickly from memory so I don't have to go looking. The Space Marines are being led by, well, this is the new Librarian model, but I count him as Tigarius because I can't stand the old model they have for him. So that's Tigarius. I've rolled for his Psychic powers already. He got the Primaris of Biomancy by default because I only rolled on that. Just for a change, basically. I know you're supposed to go on Divination, but I thought, why not, just to mix things up. So he also gets Force because he's using a Force weapon. And he got Iron Arm, Enfeeble and Hemorrhage. So there you go, just to change things up a bit. Troops, 5 scouts as you see them with camo cloaks and snipers and a missile launcher, 10 tactical marines with a las cannon and a flamer in there, ironclad dreadnought with the assault grenade upgrade, whatever it's called, thunderfire cannon, 3 devastator centurions, almost forgot their name. They are in the progress of being painted. I was just testing stuff with that first one. I think he turned out quite well. And then finally, how many Stern Guard is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 8 Stern Guard in a drop pod with Combi Grav, because, you know, new going against monstrous creatures, so why wouldn't you use gravity guns? Right, so the Tyranids. And excuse me if I pronounce anything wrong or say anything wrong, this is my first time running this army ever. So, being led by the Swarm Lord, because I like him. I know he's not exactly ideal, but I just like that he's a badass who uses 4 swords. Basically, he's being guarded by Tyrant Guard, or is it Hive Guard? No, Hive Guard are the ones with the guns. Tyrant Guard, just as default, they're basically just ablative wounds, so they've just got Rending Claws and Scything Talons from memory. Troops, that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, is that 6 or 7 Gene Stealers? That's basically just because that's all I had from the starter set that came out before Assault on Blackreach. Battle for Macragge, I think it was. Either way, I also got 13 Termagants, no upgrades. Oh, the Gene Stealers have Adrenal Glands. 2 Carnifexes, they are Dakifexes, so it's times 2 Devourers with Brain Leech worms each. I tried modelling one with like the 2 sets of Devourers and it looks hilariously bad, so that's why they've got the Talons, because I think that actually makes them look a bit intimidating. I don't think I gave them any upgrades beyond that from memory. That is 3 Zoanthropes, but it's actually a unit of 1 and then a unit of 2. That's basically just to spread around synapse range. I'm open to suggestions, by the way, about how to run these guys. Oh, I rolled for all the powers, but I'll go over that in a second. We've got 2 squads of 3 Spore Mines, just for fun really, to deep strike them in and maybe explode something. And then finally a Horospex. I am very well aware that the Horospex is awful and that the Exocrine, or whatever it's called, is much better. I think that model is badass, and that matters more to me than having the better unit. Because isn't that not amazing? Anyway, looking forward to painting that. Let's go over the Psychic powers. The Swarm Lord, he got Dominion, Catalyst, Onslaught and Psychic Scream. And then the Zoanthropes, Solo 1, Warp Blast and Psychic Scream. And the unit of 2 got Warp Blast and Paroxysm. And I believe that's it. So we're back in a second with the setup on the board, the objective, etc. The board also looks a lot better, by the way, so stay tuned for that. And here we are at deployment, and doesn't the battlefield look better than it used to? I think it does. Anyway, I forgot to mention the equipment for the Centurions. They're equipped as you see them, so it's Grav Cannons, Grav Amps, and also Missile Launchers. So naturally they're basically Tyranid killers. So the Tyranids had to deploy first, and it's long table edges if that isn't apparent. They assumed that the Space Marines would want to camp in this corner, because in their deployment that seems like the best defensible position, so they made a big anti-Stern Guard bubble here. Space Marines countered that by deploying all the way down there, because basically they just got to try and shoot the Tyranids off the table before they get to them or they lose. So that's the way things stand. The Ironclad, however, is actually hiding over there. He might get up to some trouble. The Scouts opted not to infiltrate, so they are still just sitting in the deployment of the Space Marines. The Gene Stealers did infiltrate slightly to there. Not sure what they're going to get up to. So yeah, most of the Tyranid army is up here, unfortunately, but they are defended against Stern Guard coming in on turn 1, assuming that the Space Marines steal the initiative. Let's see if they do. They do not. So the mission is Purge the Alien, I totally forgot to say that. And we'll get started with Tyranid turn 1 with no night fighting, so it might be bad for them. So here we are at the end of Tyranids turn 1, and as you might probably expect, given that the maximum range of this army is 24 inches, nothing much happened because everybody basically moved up and ran, so they all kind of had to still stay tight together though, because that drop pod with the stern guard and combi grabs are coming down on the first Space Marine turn. So they have moved up, they have ran, they tried to keep close together. The zone of swap over here went behind the building so that it's protected from line of fire to hopefully still provide synapse to the termagants here. What was interesting was the psychic phase. 6 power dice got rolled, so that's 6 dice per side, and then the Space Marine side gets 3 for Tigarius, however you pronounce his name. Tyranids got some for the Swarm Lord and some for the 2 units of Zonothropes. They managed to get Catalyst off, so now the Swarm Lord and his bodyguard and the Carnifexes feel no pain. And just for funsies, because the Space Marines tried to deny with every single power dice to try and stop Catalyst getting off, he then did Dominion, I think, the one that extends his synapse range another 6 inches, so his synapse range is now 24 inches. It won't be needed, but it was just for fun because there's so many dice left over from having 6 to start with. So that was it for the first Tyranid turn of my first ever game using Tyranids. Here comes the nasty drop pod as we go to Space Marines turn 1. And at the end of the Space Marines / Ultramarines turn 1, the drop pod scattered a little bit, so the Stern Guard changed targets. Rather than trying to take down one of the monstrous creatures using the combi grabs, they opted instead to just fire the poison 2+ wound ammo into the Gene Sailors to secure a very, very easy first blood, as a result of also using the Tactical Doctrine, which, if you don't know, makes everybody reroll 1s and tactical squads reroll all misses. Other than that, the Ironclad, he moved up a little bit. The Snipers, the last cannon, and fired into the clump of units over here. I believe the last cannon wounded the closest Carnifex, and the Snipers actually managed to take a wound off the closest Tyrant Guard. Other than that, the Centurions moved up with Tigarius. They're basically forcing the Tyranids to come towards the most deadly weapon against them by hiding the HQ amongst them. They were out of range with their grav weapons, so they fired their missiles instead, although they can technically do both, but I mean, the missiles were the only thing in range. They fired at the Horspex, and he's down to 2 wounds, so that means he lost 3, which was pretty bad. Other than that, this combat squad just moved up. I actually forgot to run them, so I'll do that in a second. I totally forgot the psychic phase, but that's because nothing happened. Rolled 6 for points again, and then realised there's nothing Tigarius can do with the powers he has from where he is right now. Next turn might be different. Other than that, the Thunderfire Cannon fired into the building full of the Termagants. I'm aware there's a bit of a rules debate going on right now that the 7th edition rulebook forgot to include the thing about blasts affecting only the level they land on, or that you select rather. I'm not playing it that if I land a hit up here, I hit everybody in the building. That just seems ridiculously unfair. So I chose the bottom floor because there was the most people on there. I fired the Ignore Cover Shell, which also negates their armour because it's AP 6. Murdered the bottom floor. They're still fearless though because of the Zonothrope hidden behind there. I keep on saying that name wrong, don't I? Zonothrope or Zonathrope, I can't remember. But anyway, they got first blood, the Space Marines. And now we'll be moving into Tyranids turn 2, and maybe the Spore Mines will appear and save the day, who knows? End of Tyranids turn 2, and we began with only one of the 2 squads of Spore Mines coming in. They had a bit of a risky deep strike, but they got a direct... No, actually no, they scattered ever so slightly. They were roughly there for safety. They scattered roughly there, so they're either going to get shot off the board by the Space Marines next turn, or they're going to explode in their faces and hopefully take something out with them. They're non-scoring, so there's no harm just throwing them in if you have a few points spare, I think. We'll see if they do anything anyway. Other than that, the Hormagants, I always get them confused, the ones with the guns, they just stood still because basically they're just distracting the Thunderfire Cannon at this point because they can't get away since it doesn't need line of sight to kill them. The Zonothrope that was hiding behind them moved up a little bit and kind of poked his head out with the hopes of maybe getting a warp blast off, but the Centurions are just out of range. They will be in range next turn if they keep moving forward though. The Swarmlord and his bodyguard moved up. These two Zonothropes also moved up together. The Carnifexes moved up, and so did the Horspecs to charge the drop pod. I keep on forgetting to include the psychic phase now. I'm still getting used to 7th edition, sorry. Yeah, so once again, the Swarm, it was a 5 for Paradise this time. The Space Marines tried to deny with every single dice they had to stop the Swarmlord getting Catalyst off. They did not succeed, so they now have Feel No Pain again, and this time I gave it to the Horspecs, assuming that he's going to get shot at to try and be murdered next turn. He also cast Onslaught on the Carnifexes. Keep in mind they were closer together prior to runs and whatnot. So that meant the Carnifexes could run and then shoot, which they did. They shot their 24 twin-linked strength 6 shots, it's like fighting Eldar again, into the Stern Guard and, unsurprisingly, killed them to a man with enough wounds left over to spare. So that's the first unit of Space Marines gone. Keep in mind this is Purge the Aliens, so that's actually a point for them finally. I was hoping to get another point by just smashing the drop pod. The Horspecs whiffed a little bit, sadly, despite having Armor Bane on his crushing claws. He did manage to get an immobilized result though, but the drop pod already counts as immobilized, so I think I've done this right. That means it's a double immobilized result, which is an extra hull point. So that means it's down to 1 rather than 2, I think. Either way, I don't think he's locked in combat because it's not a walker, so he's still probably going to get shot at. Maybe the Dreadnought will even get into a fight with him, who knows. That's about it, unfortunately. With the Space Marines redeploying all the way down to this side of the table to avoid the cluster of Tyranids, it looks like they might get away with it and stop them getting close enough to be a threat. But this was a learning experience with the Tyranids, so we'll see what happens. Something special might yet occur as we go into Space Marines turn 2. End of Space Marines turn 2, and unfortunately these spore mines were blown away by rapid firing combat squads. And excuse the car going past the window. Thankfully that did mean that the last cannon didn't fire at anything that might have done more damage, so they kind of did something. At least they aren't a scoring unit, so that's not a point as far as I can tell, even in Purge the Alien. I might be wrong about that. If I am, let me know. This combat squad moved up and ran. They're basically just trying to secure Linebreaker towards the end of the game at this point. Tigarius and his Centurions, they moved up. In the Psychic phase, 5 Paradise, Tigarius tried to use Iron Arm. Tyranid player, for lack of anything better to do, used all dice to deny and did it like 10 times over. So no powers at all. They opted to use their grav cannons and missile launchers to fire at what they could reach. Now the missile launchers could reach the whole way, but the grav cannons could only get as far as the first Tyrant Guard and ever so slightly clip the Swarmlord, who is quite obscured, more than 25% as per the new rules, by the gun emplacement there. But anyway, that doesn't really matter too much. Not about 5 or 6 wounds did get through, but the Feel No Pain rolls were on fire from Catalyst, so it resulted in only 2 wounds getting through on him, killing him outright, and that was it actually. The other rolls were either saved or they just didn't travel far enough. That was down to picking the wrong order of how the shots were resolved on the Space Marines side. Should have been the grav ones first because they had a less range, and then did the missiles afterwards because they could reach much further. That was a mistake, oh well. And finally, the Ironclad used his Melt Gun and Stormbolter to try and just wound the Horspecs before getting in there, and then tried to charge it. He rolled 5 inches. That is just over 5 inches, believe it or not. It's like 5.2, so he did not make it. I don't think it matters because I guess the Horspecs is going to probably go after him next turn anyway. But I guess we'll see. Oh, the snipers also fired at the Swarmlord and his bodyguard, or retinue. They put 1 wound on the squad, I believe, which got Lookout Sword onto him. Or did he already have a wound? I can't remember now. Either way, not all of them fired because there is intervening... Well, the sun shining hides it, but that is intervening and actually blocks quite a lot, so... Oh, finally, I forgot, the Thunderfire Cannon fired. The first shot scattered wildly, so it was only by placing the additional shots that it barely clipped 1 Termagant. Again, I'm making the mistake, I think it's Hormigants. Killed 1, and they're fearless still because of him hiding there. So that's it. Now we're going into turn 3 for the Tyranids. End of Tyranids turn 3, and a little amendment earlier in the battle. Totally forgot that the horse spikes would have had a hammer of wrath against the drop pod. Would it have made a difference? Maybe, because it might have taken off that last hull point with a glancing hit. That would have let it consolidate a little bit, but I don't think it would have made a huge difference, so it's done now. I realised when I was doing the combat against the Ironclad that I'd totally forgotten. So yeah, as you can see, the horse spikes did get into combat. His Hammer of Wrath was pointless here because his default strength can't hurt the 13 armour at the front of the Ironclad. The Ironclad dealt one of the 2 remaining wounds to him. Thankfully he whiffed quite a bit. Unfortunately the horse spikes also whiffed. Got 1 pen through on the Ironclad, so he's down 1 hull point, and he is shaken. Whichever the lowest result is, I always get shaken and the other one confused. The Carnifexes glanced the drop pod to death with their twin-link devourers. They just spammed them, and that's him gone. So that's another point. These Zonothropes moved up and ran. The Swarm Lord and his surviving bodyguard moved up and ran. They are getting a little bit closer, and as you can see, a Centurion is dead. How did that die? Well, this Zonothrop, the lone one, he got a bit brave. He went out of cover, and due to rolling another 6 for points in the Psychic phase, he fired Warp Blast. He guaranteed himself that he was going to get it. Thankfully it didn't Perils. Used the lance profile, managed to land the wound on the closest Centurion there, who actually was a sergeant, and I didn't realise till after. That'll show me for not painting him. Insta-killed him, because it's AP2, so he doesn't get a save, he doesn't have an invul, and it's strength 10, and he's toughness 5, so insta-killed. That could be huge. Also, the other squad unit of Spore Mines dropped in, wanted them to land right there. They scattered ever so slightly and landed there. I think you can probably see what the goal is there. It's to try and stop them being able to retreat from the Swarm Lord. There's still probably enough room for them to form a line though, so it was so close to being such a perfect happening, but oh well. I believe that's it. Not many Tyranid units left. Obviously the Horsebait's still locked in combat. Those Zonothropes have done nothing. I was too cowardly with their placement, especially given that I could extend the already larger synapse range of the Swarm Lord even further thanks to Dominion. So yeah, I'm learning a lot about Tyranids in this, mostly that I should have went second with them ideally, I think, so that you know where your enemy's deploying first. Future battles may be different. I know I'm talking like this is over, it's not over yet. It could be after this next turn though, so here we go with Space Marines turn 3. End of Space Marines, or Ultramarines if you prefer, turn 3. This squad turned and naturally shot this tiny unit of Spore Mines off the table. It's a shame they didn't do anything, but wasn't expecting much really. Tigarius, being a slightly bit of a coward, decided to separate from the Centurions was the best bet to move back to safety to deny Slay the Warlord. The Centurions then decided to block the path, because otherwise they would have had to form a line to be the minimum distance away from the mines, so it seemed like the smartest thing to do. The surviving Centurions moved up. They fired their grav cannons with grav amps and their missiles into the Swarm Lord and his unit. There was some good feel no pain rolls made, above average actually, well above average for a 5+. Lookouts had to be used. Basically, the resulting slaughter was the Tyrant Guard are gone. Swarm Lord survives though, and he has no wounds, so he'll be getting into combat basically. It's practically impossible. It is actually possible to fail a charge at minimum distance now in 7th edition, but you have to be in cover to do it, since you get -2 to your range. Anyway, the Horsebaits managed to deal 1 more hull point with a penetrating hit, which just stunned the Ironclad again. Ironclad then just promptly smashed his face in, so the Horseback did not do much. Wasn't really expecting it to. I still love that model. Anyway, yeah, so the Ironclad is firing snapshots, and he's consolidated a little bit back there. Finally, one last bit of luck for the Space Marines. The snipers fired at the 2 Zonothropes here, and the rocket fired a single shot rocket, insta-killed one of them because it landed and it's double his toughness. So that was a bit bad, but at least the unit survives and they're fearless because they're synapse. So I think that was it. Oh, the Thunderfire cannon absolutely whiffed this time, so even if combined shots attached to the edges, they weren't going to hit anything, but they were aiming at this floor of the building. So that's it, as we now go into Tyranids turn 4. And here we are at the end of a rather quick Tyranids turn 4, because there was basically no shooting to be had. The Carnifexes are basically the only thing with a medium range gun, and they can't hurt the Ironclad's front armour, nor can they really get... Actually, you could probably argue if he was slightly to the left it would have been side armour, but never mind, I didn't notice. Either way, they moved up, they attempted to charge the Ironclad and they failed it. It isn't a long distance, but they still managed to mess up, so oh dear. He'll be getting the charge bonus against them because he's probably not going to escape them, so there's nothing else he can do. This is almost swoop. Now a unit of one just moved up and kind of hid a little bit, basically to keep the Carnifexes in synapse range. I've been doing pretty well with that for the match, I must say. The Termagants, or Hormagants, I will remember their name for next time maybe. They all just kind of started moving down, but because it's such a big building they couldn't get anywhere. They're just going to try and move towards the enemy just for the sake of it. And this is Zonothrop moved up, and he, in the Psychic phase, used Warp Blast, the actual blast template on this squad, combat squad, and it whiffed by miles. Prior to that, the Swarm Lord tried to use Catalyst. Space Marines used every single dice to deny, and they succeeded, so no feel no pain for anybody this turn. But in combat, the Swarm Lord just absolutely annihilated the two Centurions with his instant death attacks. Tons of them, really high initiative, really high weapon skill. I thought Centurions had Purpose also, and totally forgot that they didn't. Not that it matters because they still didn't get a chance to swing before going down to the instant death. The Swarm Lord did actually whiff a little bit, so if it wasn't for instant death, one of them would have survived on a wound. So, oh, there you go, they're dead, he consolidated. He's now very close to what remains of the Space Marines front line, so he might actually start to swing this back in the Tyranid's favour if he can do enough on his own, because that's another point for the Centurions dying. Haven't actually counted up the points yet, well I'm kind of waiting until the end to find out. But now we're going to go into Space Marines turn 4 to see what happens. The turns are starting to get very quick now as we reach the end of Space Marines turn 4. It was basically Operation Shoot Everybody at the Swarm Lord. Tigarius also instigated his Warlord trait, which gives one unit within 12 or 16, whatever it is, the ability to reroll all misses. He opted to do that for the squad, combat squad with the last cannon. They were hoping the last cannon would swing it. The last cannon did actually get a wound through, so the Swarm Lord is down a wound. Everything else failed to wound because it's mostly strength 4, and they would be wounding on 6s. The Thunderfire cannon even fired at point blank. The strength 5 shot, but the first shot scattered far enough that it wasn't going to make a difference. So, in the Psychic phase, Tigarius used all his Paradise to get Iron Arm on himself, so that's what that indicates. That's his Strength and Toughness +2, but he perilled. And on the peril table he got a 3, which is Power Drain, so everybody lost some Paradise after that, but it didn't matter because it was the end of the phase anyway. And he takes a wound. There wasn't a leadership test or anything, so in 7th edition it's actually much harder for Tigarius to ignore perils, because in 6th edition his rules for re-rolling failed tests and whatnot basically meant he was invulnerable to perils of the warp. That is not the case anymore, so he's not as overpowered as he used to be at the tail end of 6th edition, which is probably for the best. So yeah, he's down a wound, but he is also a bit stronger and a bit tougher, so that might give him a chance against the Swarm Lord if he actually makes it into combat. The Ironclad, rather than going for the obvious target of the Carnifexes, thought it would be clever and tried to charge through terrain after shooting at the Zonosrope there to get them out of synapse range. The Meltagun and the Stormbolter missed, and his charge was like 4 inches, so there was no way he was getting through there. So unfortunately that means he's now open to getting shot to pieces, or maybe just assaulted. So we're going into turn 5 for the Tyranids now. An additional rule, totally forgot or misread it actually, I got it confused with something else. Iron Arm is just a straight up +3 now. It used to be a D3, right, in 6th edition? Either way, so Tigarius is actually +3 strength and toughness, it wasn't a D3. And he also gets a smash special roll. And at the end of Tyranids turn 5 things are getting really quick now. Not surprisingly, the 2 Carnifexes just unloaded everything into the Ironclad's 10 rear armour, glanced it to death so it just fell flat on its face, and obviously they're still stuck there. The Gaunts moved down, you see what I did there? Now I don't need to make the mistake. They moved down, they still didn't get enough to clear the building fully, so they're just kind of stretching to stay in synapse range of the Zonothrope that moved up. He used Warp Blast in the Psychic phase, actually got it direct out this time, managed to kill only 2 Space Marines because they went to ground, so they will be firing Snapfire next time. I count those as the creators in the 7th edition rules, by the way, so they're 6+ covered now, while in 6th edition we counted them as 5+, but if you go to ground in them you get a +2. The Swarm Lord, rather than charging at a Strength 7, Toughness 7 smash Tigarius, opted instead to make the much more easy charge against the Aegis line there, and got into combat with the Thunderfire Cannon and the Techmarine. Despite being majority Toughness 7, again, instant death wounds, 3 went through in total, but 2 was enough. No wait, no, 3 was enough. No, 2 was enough. I was going to say, wait, the gun's got more than 1 wound, but that doesn't matter because of instant death. So yeah, they're dead. He consolidated across the barrier because he was fighting on the opposite side. And now he's ready to maybe go after Tigarius, or maybe just chow down on some Space Marines. As we go into their turn 5. End of Space Marine turn 5, I think. Once again, everything shot at the Swarm Lord. The last cannon, once again, did a 1 wound, so the Swarm Lord is down to 3 wounds. Tigarius scarpered, he moved up and then he ran. In the Psychic Phase he did try and do Iron Arm. He got only 1 charge point and it was easily denied by the Tyranids. So he's just moved up there. I think he thinks his chances are better against the Zoanthrope over there. Whether or not that matters, I guess we'll see now, because that is the end of turn 5 and we're going to see if the game continues. Oh, Tigarius made the right choice to run because the game ends there. So, we'll be back in a second to tally up the points. So here we are to tally up the deaths. The Tyranid side got Linebreaker at the end there thanks to the Swarm Lord's mad charge, which offsets the Space Marines getting first blood, so it basically just comes down to casualties since it was Purge the Alien. So what died? The whole unit of the Centurions died, the whole unit of the Thunderfire Cannon died, the Ironclad died, the Stern Guard died, and their transport died. So in 7th edition the transport counts as a separate point, right? Well, that either means that the Tyranids have 6 or it means they have 5, depending on whether the transport counts as a separate kill. The Tyranids lost the Tyrant Guard there, they lost the Horospecs, they lost the Gene Stealers, and that was actually it, because the Spore Mines don't count as a unit for scoring, it says in the rules. The Gaunts weren't all killed, and that was one of the unit of 2 Zoanthropes. So that means the Space Marines actually had a score of 4 against the Tyranids' either score of 6 or 5, depending on the transport situation. Please let me know in the comments. So I think if the game was going to go on, it was definitely going to be a Tyranid win, just because of how much of a monster this guy is once he gets into combat. I'm really looking forward to painting him. But yeah, it's a Tyranid victory rather surprisingly, because I think you could probably tell by my somewhat negative tone that I thought the Tyranids had lost fairly early on because of the Space Marines deploying smartly. They did the right thing, they deployed at the opposite end of where basically the entire army was, so they could just shoot at it, but there wasn't enough shooting. Put too much faith in the Centurions, I think. They didn't do enough, they whiffed a couple of turns and they paid for it. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed. I'm going to try and record a lot of battle reports this week, which probably means they're going to be very Tyranid centric because I want to learn this new army of mine. That also means I'm not going to have time to paint them, so there probably won't be any newly painted Tyranid models for the duration of these videos. I apologise if that bugs you. But if you want me to use some of my painted armies, let me know. Who would you want to see battle each other, what kind of points? You've got a choice between Tau, Farsight Enclave, Chaos Demons, Chaos Space Marines, Ultramarines, and... did I say Tau? I did. And now Tyranids as well. So yeah, let me know. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you carry on watching. Hopefully now the battle reports are of better quality, now I have a proper battleground. Anyway, I'll see you next time. Ta-ta for now.